Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 32 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3. Yes, so we're in sort of the middle or thereabouts of the 11th chapter of the third canto. Let's first of all chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripas Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, right, so devotees, here we go. Yes, so we are in chapter 11 of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Chapter is entitled Calculation of Time from the Atom. And I'm sure you've been listening the last few days. It's a deep subject. It really is. It's quite something. So anyway, here we are. We are now, yesterday we concluded our program by reading through the verses themselves, the translations of the verses themselves, for the fifth section, which is from verse 28 to verse 39, and which we've titled Divisions in Brahma's Lifetime. In other words, during the course of Brahma's life, there are different, in terms of time, different stages, phases, you could say like that, divisions in Brahma's lifetime. Right, so the section is from verse 28 to verse 39. Let us get into it. Right, so verse 28, at the end of the day, under the insignificant portion of the mode of darkness, the powerful manifestation of the universe merges in the darkness of night. By the influence of eternal time, the innumerable living entities remain merged in that dissolution, and everything is silent. So there's a short purport, but it's important. It's, Prabhupada says that this verse, 28, is an explanation of the night of Brahma. What is the night of Brahma? How is it? How does it exist? And what's the basis of it? And how does it work? And what happens? And all that. So yes, this verse is an explanation of the night of Brahma. And what is it? What is the night of Brahma? It is the effect of the influence of time in touch with an insignificant portion of the modes of material nature in darkness. Tamagun. Let me just read it again. It is the effect of time in touch with an insignificant part of the modes of material nature in darkness. Darkness, mode of ignorance. So Prabhupada goes on that this dissolution of the three worlds is carried out, is effected, put into effect by Rudra. And who is Rudra? Of course, he's a form of Lord Shiva, but he's particularly and specifically the incarnation of darkness. So he does this whole dissolution program of the three worlds, and he is represented by the fire of eternal time, which blazes over the three worlds at that time. At that time, the time of Brahma's night, of Brahma going to sleep. So these three worlds, they're known as Vaibhava Swa. Those are the sort of classic three worlds. Vaibhava Swa. Bhua, lower, Bhuva, middle, and Swa, heavenly, planetary systems, which otherwise, and Prabhupada mentions here, they're also known as the Patala area or group, the Martya group of planets, and the Swarga group of planets. Patala, the hellish planets, Martya Loka, the middle planets, or specifically Martya, means literally death. In the middle of all these planetary arrangements, the middle ones, which are neither particularly good nor exceptionally bad, but they're just where people sort of hang out and waste their time. That's really what happens. They hang out and spend their time trying to accumulate funds, get some enjoyment, but they're just waiting. It's just an interlude before the real happening, which is the deaths of the living entities, of all of them. So Martya Loka, that's another, you could say, another name for the Bhuva Loka. And Patala is another name for Bhualoka. Bhuva and Swa, and Swarga means the heavenly planets, higher planets, where there's much more enjoyment. Swarga, otherwise known as Swa. So at that time then, the innumerable living entities merge into that dissolution. They just merge into it, they just enter into it and just get sucked into the whole thing. And that dissolution appears to be the dropping of the curtain of the scene of the Supreme Lord's energy. I mean, it's very interesting how Prabhupada expresses these things. I mean, Prabhupada is really, really so expert with the way he puts things. So the dropping of the curtain, what did Shakespeare say? The world is a stage, and all the people are like actors. And that's what's going on. And just for the time being, until the curtain drops. But in this context, the dropping of the curtain is death, or actually, in this case, the dropping of the curtain of the scene of the Supreme Lord's energy. That's the dissolution. And then at that time, what happens? Everything becomes silent. Yes. Okay, so on we go. Verse 29. When the night of Brahma ensues, all the three worlds are out of sight, and the sun and the moon are without glare, just as in the due course of an ordinary night. Okay, so again, it's a short purport that at that time, at the night of Brahma, then the light of the sun and the moon disappear, although the planets, the sun and the moon themselves as such, they don't disappear. Prabhupada says they do not vanish. They appear in the remaining part of the universe, which is beyond the three worlds, Vaibhava Swa. And that part, of course, this is at the end of Brahma's day, now just going into Brahma's night. So it's the partial dissolution. Higher planets are not dissolved or destroyed. Even the sun and the moon, they move. That's interesting, isn't it? They move into the upper part of the universe, where those higher planets are, which do not get destroyed during the night of Brahma. Of course, at the end of Brahma's life, they do get destroyed. So the portion in dissolution, the part which is destroyed, yes, it remains without sun or moon. Yes. It's dark. It's full of water, and there are indefatigable winds. This is quite a word, isn't it? Indefatigable winds. It means they cannot be fatigued. Those winds, they just carry on and just carry on. And there's no end to them. There's just no end. On and on and on and on until the next creation, then things stabilize again. Right, so, verse 30. The devastation takes place due to the fire emanating from the mouth of Sankarshan, and thus great sages like Bhrigu and other inhabitants of Mahaloka transport themselves to Jana Loka, being distressed by the warmth of the blazing fire, which rages through the three worlds below. Yes, so Jana Loka, or Mahaloka, is, well, as I understood, it isn't actually destroyed. Anyway, you'd have to check on that. But destroyed or not, of course, if it's destroyed, then its inhabitants can't stay there. Of course, the interesting point is, in that regard, that the inhabitants, if Mahaloka is destroyed, which please just check, I can't remember exactly offhand if it is or not. But if it is, somehow they don't get destroyed. This Earth planet and the various other planets, Vaibhava Swa, they do get destroyed, the planets, and along with them the inhabitants. But Mahaloka I have some, as I recall, it doesn't get destroyed, but the conditions become so unpleasant that people feel that they just cannot continue living there. So therefore they move to Janaloka, because it's not as, life-threatening or just not so unpleasant like Mahaloka, or what to speak of anything lower. The heat. And, of course, nowadays in the world, in the Western world, there's so much talk of climate change, and it appears that it's just a fact that this planet has already increased. I mean, the prevailing temperatures at different times in the year have actually increased a little. I don't know by how much. They're supposed to have increased, but it might be a degree, or it might be 2. I don't know if it's as much as 2, but anyway, a degree or so, the temperatures have increased. And so life in some places has become less comfortable because of the increase of heat. But, as they say, that this whole process of global warming is just ongoing, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down. I mean, they talk about how it really must, but actually getting it to slow down, as far as I'm aware, they really have not succeeded in that at all. So if it goes on like this, then after some number of generations, however many, like 100, maybe like 100 years, then the change of temperature is really going to be great. And parts of the world which are now quite cold, they're going to become quite warm. They're cold in winter, but in the winter in the future they're going to be fairly warm. And what to speak of places like equatorial places, which they're really quite hot, but they're going to become uncomfortably hot. Right, so on to verse 31, because verse 30 has no purport. At the beginning of the devastation, all the seas overflow, and hurricane winds blow very violently. Thus the waves of the seas become ferocious, and in no time at all the 3 worlds are full of water. Well, that's extreme, isn't it? That's really, really extreme. And that's not just a matter of global warming. That's just what happens at the end of Brahma's every single day going into his night. Right. The waves of the seas become so ferocious that they actually overflow off the planets. How's that? If you're familiar with the sea at all, you would know that sometimes the sea just goes out of control when there's powerful, powerful winds. And I'm sure you've seen pictures on some of these little beach settlements in England and America. People think they'll be very nice and natural and live by the sea, and it'll just be really very pleasant and nice. But sometimes when the sea just becomes totally out of control, then the land on which the houses are standing next to the beach, the land gets washed away and the houses fall into the sea. Yeah, you got to watch out. When you're dealing with the sea, got to watch out. Sometimes it's very, very dangerous. All right. So let's have a look at the purport here. Short purport is here. So this is fire from the mouth of Lord Sankarshan. And during this whole period of the process of dissolution, fire comes from the mouth of Lord Sankarshan for 100 years of the demigods, or, there's how many human years to 1 year of the demigods? Do you remember? 360 human years is one typical year of demigods. So the fire comes out of Sankarshan's mouth for 100 years of the demigods, or multiply by 360, 36,000 human years. Then Prabhupada explains, for another 36,000 human years, there are torrents of rain with violent winds and waves, and the seas and the oceans overflow. Means even off the planet. That's real overflowing. So that's altogether 72,000 years, human years. 36,000 human years of fire coming from Sankarshan's mouth, and 36,000 human years of rains, winds, waves, and ultimately the seas and the oceans overflow. So these total 72,000, 2 times 36,000, these 72,000 years are the beginning of the partial devastation of the 3 worlds. If that's just the beginning of the partial devastation, what does the peak of the total devastation look like? Anyway, I'm sure we'll find out in due course. Bhagavatam will describe, but it's pretty dramatic. But otherwise, people, we've all been through these things, actually. We've all been through these things, and the memories are there or somewhere in the back of the mind. But Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the people forget these devastations, and people think, oh, we're happy here, even though there are political problems, there's so much war, so much crime, and so much dissatisfaction and argument and cheating and everything like that. But people, human beings, you have to give them, this is very tongue-in-cheek. It means it's a joke, but it's also not a joke. You have to give the human beings now in Kali Yuga credit. They're expert at overlooking things and thinking that we can just carry on, and it is fine, and it will be fine. But unfortunately, it's not fine now, and in the future it'll be even worse. It'll be much worse. So that expertise, if we want to say sarcastically, that expertise in just ignoring what's wrong with this crazy world, Prabhupada says this is called Maya, or that which is not. So on we go now to verse 32. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, lies down in the water on the seat of Ananta with his eyes closed. And the inhabitants of the Janaloka planets offer their glorious prayers unto the Lord with folded hands. Again, there's another short purport. All these purports are short, but there's important information there. So the Lord, as the verse says, as Maitreya Muni says, the Lord lies down on Ananta with his eyes closed. Now those of us who are studying Bhakti Vaibhava, we also lie down sometimes, every day. And we also close our eyes every day. At least particularly in the evenings we do that, and then we sleep. And when we sleep, we go into tamagun, mode of ignorance. And we just forget everything. We forget who we are, where we are, what we're doing, and what I'm capable of doing, what I'm not capable. All these things become forgotten because of sleep. But here in this particular verse, in the third line, if you can see the Sanskrit, the third line of the Sanskrit says, Yoga Nidra Nimilaksha. Yeah, Yoga Nidra, we've all heard that term before, mystic sleep. Yeah. And Nimilaksha, with his eyes closed. Aksha meaning eyes. Closed eyes. So, but Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the purport, and it's a very, very important point. The word Yoga Nidra is specifically mentioned here. And we, referring to the mystic yoga, mystic nidra, sleep of the Lord with his eyes closed. But Prabhupada makes the point we should not misunderstand that this condition the Lord enters into of yoga nidra, mystical slumber, Nimilaksha, with his eyes closed. We shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that the Lord goes to sleep as we do. Yes, of course, every night we go to sleep. But the Lord goes into Yoga Nidra. It's a mystical state of trance, actually. And as Prabhupada mentions here in the purport, such an important point, it's a manifestation of his internal potency, not his external potency. And indeed, in Brahma Samhita, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he makes the point that when Mahavishnu enters into his mystical slumber, it's internal potency. It's not just Maya, just tamagun. It's the most wonderful transcendental situation. And therefore, his consort, Mahavishnu's consort, Ramadevi, she manifests within his body as he is now in that mystical state of transcendental samadhi within. his consciousness is withdrawn from outside. He's not conscious of anything outside his body, but his consciousness is fully focused within. And he and Rama Devi, who is the expansion of Radharani, the eternal consort of Mahavishnu, Rama Devi. So she and Mahavishnu have pastimes within. And one perspective on that is that those pastimes that are now going on within the body of Mahavishnu with Rama Devi, they are so incredibly beautiful and so absorbing that the Lord's consciousness withdraws from external manifestation and is focused completely internally. I mean, there are interesting ways of seeing the situation, but it's all very transcendental, internal potency. Right, so, and Prabhupada makes the point, whenever the word yoga is used, it should be understood to refer to that which is transcendental. In the transcendental stage, all activities are always present, and they're glorified by prayers of great sages like Brigu. And just, I can mention one funny little incident I heard about when I was in Sri Rangam. When 20 years ago, let's say, I think a little more than 20. I think it may have been 91. Something like that. So we were in Sri Rangam. And it's a temple town, or temple city even. And everything is focused around, and so many things are even within the walls of the town. Yeah, that is just like that. So they had recently, the tower, Gopuram, like ornamental tower that you get at the entranceways of the old South Indian temples, they had finally just built the main Gopuram. The first time I went there was just a gateway with no decorative, tower at all. And it had been like that for hundreds of years. But then we went the second time, and the Gopuram was there now. And these decorative towers, they have, not exactly deities, but like informal deities, forms of the Supreme Lord and demigods, etc., etc. And of course, the temple of Ranganath is the temple of Lord Vishnu, who is in that state of Yoga Nidra, lying down. That's the main deity in the main temple. So they had just quite recently, just shortly before we went there the second time, they'd had a big opening ceremony to sort of consecrate and officially open this big tower on the actual main entrance to this temple, which is the biggest temple in India. So, it was all very nice. But then one of the people told us that they invited so many dignitaries and spiritual people to come. And who should come but the current Shankaracharya, from Kanchi, from Kanchipuram. He's one of the traditional Shankaracharyas, descended from disciples of Shankaracharya himself. So, and in fact that man, the Shankaracharya had donated, if I remember correctly, $25,000 to complete this, the Gopuram. So anyway, it was the opening day. People were making speeches, and it's a celebration. And the Shankaracharya of Kanchi, who's just about the highest, at least non-Vaishnav, spiritual authority in the country, he had commented that yes, this is Sri Rangam, Ranganath is here, he is Narayan, he is Vishnu, but here he's lying down, here Ranganath is sleeping, Vishnu is sleeping, he is in Tamagun. The man had said that during this opening ceremony. And of course, a lot of people, they wouldn't even notice that because they're just not tuned into spiritual philosophy and concepts, etc. And it's not very good. But some of the Sri Vaishnavas did notice it, and they got really angry. So one of them took the Shankaracharya of Kanchi to court. Defamation, sued him for defamation of Lord Vishnu. That's what they told us. And the man lost the case. I mean, the Shankaracharya lost the case. Evidence was produced to show that according to Shastra, when Vishnu is in Yoga Nidra, he's not in Tamagun, he's not sleeping like us. So therefore the Shankaracharya lost the case and had to pay some compensation. How's that? Okay, let us continue though. Verse 33. Thus, the process of the exhaustion of the duration of life exists for every one of the living beings, including Lord Brahma. One's life endures for only 100 years in terms of the times in the different planets. Right. So, okay, there's a more substantial purport here. So Prabhupada elaborates on this point. Every living entity lives for 100 years in terms of the times where they're living. Yeah. So one living being's 100 years on a particular planet is different from another living being's 100 years according to the times on a different planet. So Lord Brahma's, of course, his 100 years is longer than ours. In fact, we just read, didn't we, a few days ago, Brahma lives 311 trillion 40 billion years, but for him it's 100. Very interesting. So it's very long time, but still Brahma is afraid of dying. So in order to get free from dying and not be sort of destroyed by the time of death, Lord Brahma engages in devotional service to get free from the material energy. Yeah, but anyway, animals, of course, they've got no sense of responsibility. or any intelligence to understand there are better, more important things to do in life other than just eat and sleep, etc. So that's the animals, but in many cases the humans who do have a sense of responsibility, they waste their time waiting for death. As Prabhupada says, the way he puts it, it's a very, very traditional Old English way of speaking. They while away their valuable time. Just while it away. I don't. You quite likely had experience. You go to visit a doctor or the dentist. So there you are. You go in, you sit down, and you got to wait, because doctors and dentists, you know what it is. One of their duties is to make people wait. Almost every single time when you go to a doctor or a dentist, you have to wait. So there you are, now you're waiting, you're just sort of sitting there. And all you're doing is waiting for the time to pass. That's all. That's all. You're not actually doing anything constructive, achieving something, or solving some problem. You're just waiting till the time passes. And sometimes in these doctors and dentists places, they have a table in the middle or somewhere, and it has some magazines. And sometimes even devotees, they just pick up a magazine, start reading it. If it's a man, he may pick up a magazine about motor cars and start reading it. And he's going to know, what's he going to do? Buy some fancy new motor car? But he's just whiling away the time. Whiling away the time, as Prabhupada says. They while away their valuable time without engaging it in devotional service. And they think everything's fine, and they're unafraid of death. But don't worry, it will catch up with them. Right, so Prabhupada says this is the madness of human society. It's the madness of human society. A madman has no sense of responsibility. And similarly, any human who doesn't have that sense of responsibility is also mad. I mean, but what sense of responsibility? Not just responsibility to the family or to the country. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, it is necessary that every human being be responsible in preparing himself for the next life, even if he has a duration of life like that of Brahma, the greatest of all living creatures within the universe. Okay. Verse 34. The 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into two parts, the first half and the second half. The first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current. So Prabhupada examines this statement in the short purport, that Brahma lives for 100 of his years. Well, that's already been discussed. Bhagavad Gita 8:17. But now, interesting point, that Brahma has already passed the point of 50. He's just now finished 50 years of his life, and there's just another 50 still to come. So it must be, for him, it must be sobering. My life is half over. Yeah. I remember when I reached the age of 40, and I understood that according to the law of averages, my life is half finished. It's sobering. And what to speak of when you reach 70. So that notice that I'm halfway through, it just shows, for Brahma, death is inevitable. 35. In the beginning of the first half of Brahma's life, there was a millennium called Brahma Kalpa, wherein Lord Brahma appeared. The birth of the Vedas was simultaneous with Brahma's birth. Okay. Yes, all right. So Srila Prabhupada gives another shortish, pretty short purport. Prabhupada refers to Padma Purana Prabhas Kanda that in a month of Brahma, 30 days, a regular month, many kalpas take place, such as the Varaha Kalpa and Pitri Kalpa. So 30 days is his month, beginning from the full moon day through the dark moon day to the next full moon day, basically. So 50 of his years is called Parada, and the first day of, in the first Parada, is called the Brahma Kalpa or Sweta Varaha Kalpa. Right. Prabhupada says the Sweta Varaha appearance of the Lord is the first birthday of Brahma. And Prabhupada makes the point, the birth date of Brahma is in the month of March, according to the Hindu calendar. And Prabhupada says this statement is reproduced from the explanation of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Okay, onward we go. The millennium which followed the first Brahma millennium is known as the Padma Kalpa, because in that millennium the universal lotus flower grew out of the navel reservoir of water of the personality of Godhead, Hari. Anyway, Prabhupada makes a little comment here. The millennium following the Brahma Kalpa is known as the Padma Kalpa because the universal lotus grows in that millennium. As we know, the lotus comes out of the navel of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. The Padma Kalpa is also called the Pitri Kalpa in certain Puranas. All right. Verse 37. O descendant of Bharat, the first millennium in the second half of the life of Brahma is also known as the Varaha millennium, because the personality of Godhead appeared in that millennium as the hog incarnation. Okay. So there are different millenniums or kalpas, Brahma, Padma, Varaha, kalpas. It's a little puzzling for the layman. And even there are some scholars who are they're laymen, in other words. Some scholars think these kalpas are one and the same. But Prabhupada says, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Brahma Kalpa is the beginning of the in the beginning of the first half appears to be the Padma Kalpa. In other words, They're synonymous. Brahmakalpa, Padmakalpa. And Srila Prabhupada says, we will simply abide what is said. The present millennium is the second half of the duration of the life of Brahma. Okay. Verse 38. The duration of the two parts of Brahma's life, as above mentioned, is calculated to be equal to 1 nimesha, less than a second. If you remember, a nimesha, do you remember? It is 8/15ths of a second. Yeah, in cosmic time. So the two parts of Brahma's life is equal to 1 nimesha, half a second for the Supreme Lord, who is unchanging and unlimited, and is the cause of all causes of the universe. All right. So anyway, now we do have a bit of a more substantial purport here. Let's have a look. So anyway, Prabhupada notes that Maitreya has been giving a considerable description of the time of different dimensions, and from the atom up to the life of Brahma. It's a whole, wow, what a subject it is. So now he attempts to give an idea of the time of the Lord, a hint by the standard of life of Brahma, that the life of Brahma is less than a second of the Lord's time, less than a second to be precise, from what we read in the purport of verse 14, 8/15ths of 1 second for the Lord. Isn't that incredible? This is really something amazing. Really amazing. Gives us a perspective on our own situations to some degree. So anyway, Prabhupada then quotes Brahma Samhita verse 48, which says that the Brahmas live just for the one breath of Lord Vishnu. Yeah. One of his breaths. Right. So the impersonalists, of course, you can read that translation if you like. Well, let me just read it. Brahma Samhita verse 48. I worship Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, whose plenary portion is Mahavishnu. All the heads of the innumerable universes, the Brahmas, live only by taking shelter of the time occupied by one of his breaths, less than one of his seconds. And that's the life of Brahma, 311 trillion, 40 billion of our years. Anyway, the impersonalists don't believe in the form of the Lord, so they don't believe that he sleeps. They just, and it's interesting and important point, they just come to different conclusions based on human capacity. That's all. That the existence of the Supreme Lord is just a manifestation of what is opposite to the human condition, human existence. So man has senses. That means the Lord doesn't. Man has a form, means the Lord doesn't. Man sleeps, the Lord doesn't. And you can continue on in different ways. Man has relationships, the Lord doesn't. Man eats, the Lord doesn't. etc. So anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't agree with this. It says he goes into yoga nidra, state of samadhi, which, or you can call it transcendental sleep or mystical slumber. So because he sleeps, he must breathe. Brahma Samhita confirms that in the time of his breathing, innumerable Lord Brahmas take birth and die in the time of the Supreme Lord's breathing. Amazing. So now there's a second paragraph here. What does it say? Yeah, there's complete agreement between the Bhagavatam and Brahma Samhita. That's something we need to note, that they are parallels. They're not competing in any way. They're in agreement. And reading one helps us understand the other. I mean, it's definitely recommended that you read Brahma Samhita if you have not, particularly when it comes to the process of creation. The description given in Brahma Samhita is very helpful for us. So anyway, eternal time is never lost, along with the life of Brahma. Eternal time continues, but it can't control the Lord, because the Lord controls time. And in the spiritual world, there's time, but it doesn't control the activities. Like Lord Krishna wanted to dance longer with the gopis, so the night became as long as the night of Lord Brahma. On the basis of his desire, time became flexible. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, time is unlimited, and the spiritual world is also unlimited, since everything there exists on the absolute plane. Okay, and on we go to verse 39. Eternal time is certainly the controller of different dimensions, from that of the atom up to the super divisions of the duration of Brahma's life. But nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme. Time can control only those who are body conscious, even up to the Satya Loka or the other higher planets of the universe. Right, okay. So let's carry on. There's just 3 more verses in this chapter. So now the next section, 6th section, it's just verses 40 and 41, the structure of the universe. So we'll just read straight through. 40. This phenomenal material world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles as a combination of 8 material elements transformed into 16 further categories within and without as follows. Okay, so now we're talking about the size of this universe. So Prabhupada gives some explanations. The material world is a display of 16 diversities and 8 material elements. This is Sankhya. Sankhya means to analyze. So the 16 diversities are the 11 senses and the 5 sense objects. The 8 elements are the gross and subtle material elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. So these are combined together and distributed throughout the universe, and the diameter of the universe is 4 billion miles. 4 billion, okay. So there are innumerable other universes, though, some bigger than this one. All of them are put together in the same way, the same diversities and the same elements. Okay, verse 41. The layers or elements covering the universes are each 10 times thicker than the one before, and all the universes clustered together appear like atoms in a huge combination. So let's quickly have a look at the purport. So the coverings of the universe are made of the same elements which the universe is made of. Each one, as the coverings go out from the most inner to the most outer, each one is 10 times thicker than the one before. So the first is Earth, which is 10 times thicker than, the whole of the universe where we are, where all the planets are, the open part. The Earth covering is 10 times thicker than that whole where all the planets where we are. So in other words, what is it? It's 40 million miles. Water is then 10 times thicker than Earth, fire 10 times more than water, etc., etc. So the universe within the coverings is like an atom compared to the coverings. The number of universes is unknown, even to those who can estimate the coverings. All right, and final section, verse 42, Krishna is the cause of all causes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is therefore said to be the original cause of all causes. Thus the spiritual abode of Vishnu is eternal without a doubt, and it is also the abode of Mahavishnu, the origin of all manifestations. Oops. Yes, so again there's a purport here, look at that. So, Mahavishnu, Prabhupada says, who is residing in Yoga Nidra on the causal ocean, and so many universes are coming from his body as he breathes. He only temporarily appears in Mahatattva. He's not in the Mahatattva the whole time. Yeah. But he's there just for the purpose of the manifestation of the material worlds. But he is non-different. He is a plenary portion of Krishna, non-different from him. But his formal appearance is temporary. So the original form, the Swarup, the real form, that's Krishna himself, living in Vaikuntha, or rather, Goloka Vrindavan. So Prabhupada makes the point that the word Mahatmana used here to indicate Mahavishnu, and his real manifestation is Lord Krishna, who's called Parama. And Prabhupada concludes the chapter by quoting Brahma Samhita verse 1, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha Anadya Adya Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. The Supreme Lord is Krishna, the original personality of Godhead, known as Govinda. His form is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, and he is the original cause of all causes. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.